This is continuing coverage in the trial of Richard Merritt from the Hidden Killers podcast on the True Crime Today network.
Just could you remind the jury where that QT station is located?
It's in this area here.
And what time did he leave the QT station?
I have it noted at approximately 2:59 p.m.
Which direction did he head after that, if you could please indicate on the map?
Yes. He goes north again a short distance to Interstate 85, enters the interstate that way, and then travels south.
And then where does he go?
He travels south to Interstate 285 and then gets on the top end perimeter around 285, traveling towards Interstate I-75, which is indicated at this location.
Okay. And where did he go after that?
He travels north on Interstate I-75 from the perimeter Atlanta area all the way up through Cobb County, past Kennesaw, past Ackworth, past Emerson, is indicated here, past Cartersville, and then continues up to this location here in that vicinity, which is just north of Cartersville in a community called White.
And where is, on this map, the Cobb County Jail, where he was supposed to turn himself in?
I think it's right.
And does that say, just for the record, does that say inclusion and then Smyrna underneath?
Correct. It's actually, you can see a portion of it out here is labeled Cobb County Detention Center. It's indicated by that square right there.
Did he make any stops on 75 North?
He did not until he reached this part in Bartow County, just north of Cartersville. And his first stop was at, when he exited the interstate, was at 4:07 p.m. He gets off the exit and goes to the parking lot of an address at 2310 US 411 Cartersville, and that's a Waffle House at that location.
And where approximately is that on this exhibit?
Right there in that cluster of points right there.
What time did he leave that Waffle House?
He left immediately after at 4:08 p.m. and enters the roadway at I-75 and continues north again.
And then what happened?
He continues north this one exit and exits Interstate I-75 at the Cass White Road exit.
Where is that?
They're indicated at the most northern points that you can see on this map.
What time did he exit I-75 onto the Cass White Road exit?
That was at 4:12 p.m.
And what happened after that?
At 4:14 p.m., I received a strap alert indicating that the strap on his ankle monitor had been compromised.
Where were you when you received that alert that the strap had been compromised at 4:14 p.m.?
I was near my home in Cartersville, Georgia, which is just south of that location, not more than 10 minutes, actually at a daycare where my children stay.
What did you do when you received, and did you receive that alert on your cell phone?
Yes, I did. I received it via a text message.
What did you do when you received that alert?
I opened up the Attenti electronic monitoring software application to look at his GPS location, where he was.
Were you able to determine where the ankle monitor was?
Yes.
Did you go to that location?
Yes, I did. When I looked at the information, it indicated he was not in Merritt at the Cobb County Jail, but at that location in White, Georgia, just off of Interstate I-75. And since I was in such close proximity to it, I just proceeded that direction.
And if you could take a seat. Thank you. Can you just help me move that? Do you know approximately what time you arrived at the location where the ankle monitor was located?
It was probably 20 or 30 minutes after that, so around 4:40 p.m.
Did you have police officers respond to that location as well?
No, I did not.
What type of location was that?
That was a TNA truck stop. It's actually a large truck stop, and on the other side of the road is a pilot truck stop right off that exit. I think it's the last truck stop before you get into Atlanta.
I'm going to show you what I have marked as State's Exhibits 53, 54, 55, and 56. Can you describe to the jury what those are?
These are aerial photographs of the TNA Travel Center truck stop there off the Cass White Road exit in White, Georgia.
Okay. And is that the truck stop where you found the did you find the ankle monitor?
I did. The GPS location indicated it was going to be in the corner of the parking lot of that truck stop. So when I pulled into the truck stop, it wasn't hard to tell where it was. There was a lamp post in that corner where the GPS location indicated right under it was a trash can.
Okay, and do those exhibits that I just showed you fairly and accurately represent what that area looked like at the time?
Yes.
All right, Your Honor, I'd move to admit State's Exhibits 53, 54, 55, and 56. Did the GPS records show that the defendant actually severed the strap of the ankle monitor while at that truck stop?
The alert we received through the case management software doesn't tell us what it does, just that there's been a compromise in the strap, and you actually have to get the ankle monitor and look at it to determine what caused that.
Okay. Looking at State's Exhibit 53, can you just in general describe to the jury where you found the ankle monitor?
Yes, if you see the parking lot that's to the right, that's just adjacent to the truck stop, and the bottom right-hand corner, you see a little notch in the parking lot.
Can you stand up and demonstrate behind you where that's located?
I didn't even know it was behind me.
Look up.
Right here. In this corner here, you can see the top of the lamp post, and underneath that lamp post was a trash can.
Okay. What are we looking at in State's Exhibit 54?
That is a photograph of the lamp post with the trash can in the bottom of it in the corner of that parking lot.
Did you take this photo?
I believe I did.
And what are we looking at in State's Exhibit 55?
I went over to the trash can, opened the flap, and I could see the ankle monitor inside it, so I just removed the top of it and took this photograph of the ankle monitor laying in the trash can.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right. Next to that.
And what is this in State's Exhibit 56?
That is the actual ankle monitor I retrieved from the trash can.
Okay. And had the strap been severed?
Yes.
Okay. Did it appear that it had been severed with an instrument or by hand?
I believe it was cut. So it was cut with a knife, a pair of scissors, something like that.
What did you do after you recovered this ankle monitor?
I just took possession of it, and then I left that location. I did drive through the parking lot. I didn't see Mr. Merritt or any signs of him. And then I traveled from that area back to my home with that ankle monitor.
Did you report the violation?
Immediately when I received the strap alert and looked at his location and saw he was not at the Cobb County Jail, you could only surmise he was not turning himself in as the court order required. I contacted his pretrial officer and notified them immediately.
Okay. When did you learn that Shirley Merritt had been murdered?
The next morning, I received a call from Kenya Jackson, the pretrial services director, letting me know that I was probably going to be receiving calls from authorities in DeKalb County wanting to know the location of Richard Merritt and that his mother had been murdered.
Okay. And did you assist DeKalb County officers and detectives in investigating this case?
For the most part of that day into the next day, yes, I did.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you take a second to grab some records here? Do you have a history record with you? You do. Is it all right if I take those from you?
Sure.
Thank you very much. Mr. Queen, do you recall when you started monitoring Mr. Merritt?
It was in the summer of 2018, I think around June.
Okay. And you said that you had taken over from another provider, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And we've been talking a lot today about the records specifically from February the 1st.
Correct.
But you would have records from the entire time that you monitored Mr. Merritt, right?
That is correct.
Looking at those records from February 1st, there was a time that is on these records this Ms. Pott mentioned, and a place, it was 5887 Glen Ridge Road. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And on your direct testimony, you mentioned that it was a business location. Is that right?
That's what it appeared.
And I think you said it looked like a parking lot.
No, it was a business, and it looked like that his GPS location mainly was in the parking lot.
Okay. But you weren't at that location that day,
No,
right?
I'm just reviewing the case management record and the GPS points to determine that.
So you don't know whether Mr. Merritt was in the parking lot or went into that business?
I wasn't there, so I don't know that exactly.
Okay. And you said it was about an 18-minute visit?
Approximately, yes.
And the next location that morning, I believe your testimony was a return trip to the Planters Row home. Is that right?
That's correct.
Let the record reflect that I am going to publish Exhibit 51 of the state who's been previously entered. Do my best to pull out so you can see. Okay. Now you see my pen right here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see. This is where you received the return to Planters Row. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And that was at 9:38:28. Is that right?
That's correct. And
each of these individual entries, they're about a minute apart, right?
Yes.
We've got 9:32:28, 9:33:28. So we're not getting a second by second itemization.
No, the system doesn't take a second by second. It takes a no less than a point every minute.
And at 9:38, that's the first that you learn of the 1519 return to the home, right?
That's correct.
But we don't know if that's in the driveway or in the house. You don't know where that is exactly.
Not exactly, no.
Now, we talked a little bit about
the QT that you're familiar with from your own experience, right?
Yes.
You yourself did not go to the QT that day.
No.
And you did not collect the footage that we watched today.
No, I did not.
Now, you did go to what you have identified as the TA truck stop.
Yes.
Right? And you went there after you received an alert on your phone of a sort of violation, is what you said.
That's correct.
Okay. And how fast do you receive those alerts? Did you say it's 90 seconds?
It can be as quickly as 90 seconds.
And then it was about 20 or 30 minutes, I think you said, from receiving that to going to the location itself.
That's correct.
And do you have the coordinates of the trash can?
The exact coordinates? I'm sure they're probably in that report, yes.
Okay, so if I gave you the report, that you'd be able to point out the exact trash can?
I could probably come pretty close.
May I approach, Judge?
Mm-hmm.
And I've given the witness exhibit 51.
Oops, sorry. Okay, on this report, and I'm doing this by my knowledge that the strap alert, when the strap was compromised, was at 4:14 p.m. And on this report on February 1st, 2019 at 4:14 p.m., that corresponds with the strap alert. There is a latitude and longitude. I'll be glad to give you those if you'd like them.
Sure.
Okay. The latitude is 34.27. I don't have my glasses. 3602. And the longitude is negative 84.806465. And there's a geocoded address on the report to that latitude and longitude, listing it as 997 Cassville White Road, Northwest, Cartersville, Georgia.
And the 997 is the truck stop.
I believe it is, yes.
Right? And that's when you got the alert that it was violated, right? The monitor was violated. Okay.
Right.
And you went to that trash can, right?
I did.
And you took the lid off.
I did.
And the monitor was sitting, as we saw, sort of near the top.
Near the top.
Okay. There were no clothes in that trash can that you saw, right?
No, there were not. That I saw. There was trash, a pizza box, and other assorted trash.
Okay, just 1 minute. And Mr. Queen, you've been working, it sounds like, in this field for some time now?
Since 1990.
And you've been with the court system for how many years?
Depends on which court system.
All the court systems.
Since 1990.
Since 1990. So you know from your work what happens if somebody violates their conditions, right?
Yes.
Then there would be a report created often.
Correct.
And that would be given to the courts.
Correct.
And someone can be violated based off of that report.
That's
right?
correct.
And in this case, you didn't write a report, right?
A particular report to Cobb County Pretrial Services, no, I did not.
Okay. And we just talked about it a little bit before, but you had been monitoring Mr. Merritt. I think you said it was since about March of 2018. Is that what you said?
I had been monitoring since about June.
June, okay. So a number of months at that point, and over that period, Mr. Merritt's bond was never revoked due to a violation.
Not as I recall, no.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Is the witness be excused?
Yes.
Rule approval.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Break? Yes. Break? Okay. If the state will call us next witness.
Yes, the state calls Jay Barney.
Yeah.
James Bernie.
Sir, you may be seated. Just raise your right hand. Swear from the testimony is in the court of the truth.
I do. Yeah, my name is James, last name Bernie, B-E-R-N-I.
Just 1 moment. How are you employed?
I work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the FBI.
Okay, how long have you been with the FBI?
Since 2007, so almost 15 years.
And do you work with any particular department or division within the FBI?
I do. I'm part of the FBI's CAST team, Cellular Analysis Survey team.
Okay, and what does CAST do?
Yeah, so CAST is a team within the FBI that was stood up in 2009 after the FBI noticed an increased use in cell phone records used in criminal trials. So a CAST team member like myself specializes in record analysis as it comes from the provider.
What is your educational background that got you involved in this?
Yeah, so I have a Bachelor of Arts degree from Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama.
Okay. And what other experience do you have that is relevant to your current duties with the FBI?
So I spent 10 years active duty in the United States Army. The last 6 years I spent doing military intelligence work with the National Security Agency, or NSA, where my job was basically to track Department of Defense high-value targets using their communication devices like cell phones, satellite phones, things like that in Iraq and Afghanistan.
And does CAST work only on criminal cases?
They do not. So anytime that we need to locate a device, it could be, a runaway, it could be a suicidal kid. Anytime we need to locate a device, we can use this technique, and CAST is employed to do that.
Okay. What is historical cellular record analysis?
Yeah, so by law, all service providers have to keep a record of every device on their network, and they do these on what's called call detail records, or CDRs for short. So think of a CDR as like your old school phone bill when we used to get those, right? It would have our number, the other number we were in contact with, the date and time of that call, and then the duration. Was it a 30-second call? Was it a 10-minute call? But in addition to that information, there's other data in there that's useful to law enforcement, and that is the cell phone tower and the sector or side of that tower that's used for each of those activities on your call detail record. In addition to the call detail record, the providers have to keep track of every tower in their network, and they do this in what's called a tower list. And so a tower list is a unique list of all of the towers in the country. So T-Mobile, for instance, has to keep track of every tower that they have in the network. And each of those towers is uniquely numbered. So it's like a fingerprint within their network. So for instance, if we're looking for tower 123 in T-Mobile, there's only one location of that. And that tower list provides the street address or the latitude and longitude spot on the earth of where that tower is. and then the breakdown of its sectors. So it'll say sector 1 points in this direction, sector 2 points in a different direction. So historical call detail analysis is basically taking the call detail records, the when an activity occurred, putting it together with the tower list, the where. By putting those two things together, we can get a general location of where a device is when it has an activity on the network.
And have you gone through specialized training for historical cellular record analysis?
I have.
And who generally puts that training on?
So that training is run by the FBI, but we get trained by both private and government contractors, in things like radio wave theory. How does the radio wave move through space? We get training on the cellular devices themselves. We've talked to Apple, we've talked to Samsung and Google, right? We also get training on towers and why towers are in a certain spot and why they're, not in other spots. But some of the best training we receive is from the cell phone providers themselves. So AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, they come in and they teach us how their network works. From the time I hit that green button to place the call to my wife to say I'm coming home until that call ends, they tell us, hey, this is what happens in the network. This is how that call is then represented in our records, and then how we can use those records to find a general location. So we get a lot of great training from the providers themselves.
Okay. And do you conduct trainings in this field yourself as well?
I have. So I've instructed at what we call the basic historical call detail analysis class, which is where we teach federal law enforcement agencies, state and local agencies on the basics of call detail analysis, like what records are available, how to review them, those kinds of things. I've taught probably about a dozen times in like 6 different states. I've also taught at International Homicide Investigators course. I've been to London to speak at a law enforcement symposium over there on call detail records.
And you sort of answered this question a few minutes ago, but just to kind of reiterate, in your job, do you utilize call detail records to locate people?
I do. Again, this is my full-time job and has been since January of 2019. So I'm reviewing records and responding to emergency situations on a daily basis. So if I'm not in court, I'm probably looking at records or assisting local agencies.
Can you say approximately how many times you've analyzed call detail records to locate somebody's whereabouts?
Yeah, probably, again, several hundred times probably using this technique.
Okay, and you said that you've been through training with several different cell phone providers. Are you familiar with the cellular technologies utilized by these major providers in the United States?
I am.
And are you familiar with their records keeping practices?
Yes, I am.
Have you ever testified as an expert in this field before?
I have.
Can you say approximately how many times?
Yeah, I think this is my 49th trial in 9 different states.
Okay, and have you presented the results of cellular analysis that you've performed in court before?
I have.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time I'd move to tender Special Agent Burney as an expert in the field of historical cellular record analysis.
Any objection?
No objection.
He will be so recognized.
Okay. Agent Burney, were you asked to review any records in this case?
I was.
Specifically, were you asked to review any cell phone records?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How many cell phone records were you asked to review?
So in this case, there were 2 cell phone records, and then I was also given GPS locations from a ankle monitor.
Okay. And did you formulate any opinion as to the location of the phones in this case on February 1st, 2019?
I did.
Okay. And what methodology did you use in forming your opinion?
Yeah, again, as I discussed with the historical call detail analysis, basically taking the CDRs and the tower list, putting those together to get a general location of where a device is when it had an activity on the network.
Okay, and is this methodology generally accepted in your area of expertise?
It is.
Okay. Did you create a report as to your findings?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay, I'm going to show you State Exhibit 88. Can you please describe for the jury what that item is?
Yeah, this is a printout of my PowerPoint analysis.
Okay, and is this in fact the report that you made as to your findings and methodologies in this case?
It is.
Okay, and have there been any material alterations or deletions?
No, there have not.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time I move to admit State Exhibit 88.
Any objection?
No objection.
Admitted.
I want to start by going over just your report page by page. This is page 1 of the report. Can you describe to the jury what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so this just shows the devices I was asked to take a look at. So again, there's 2 phone numbers, one 404-358-8254, an AT&T phone number. And then the second device is 770-378-2989, again, another AT&T device. Also included in my analysis is the GPS locations from an ankle monitor from Attenti.
And who provided these documents to you?
Your office did.
And what were you asked to do?
I was asked to review the records as they related to specific dates and times of interest, and that'll be annotated in my report here.
Okay. Let's look at page 2. Can you describe to the jury what this is?
Again, this is just a summary of how I was involved in the case. Again, asked by the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office to review several phones. I just talked about those. And then the methodology, again, using the call detail records and the tower list. And then also that this report includes global positioning system or GPS locations as they came from an ankle monitor. And then it just says, that not all events will be depicted. So again, I was just asked to take a look at these devices as they related to specific dates and times of interest.
What did you include on page 3 of your report?
Yeah, so these are all just photographs of different cell phone towers and those antennas. And the most common we see is the one in the top left corner there. That's what you see as you drive down the interstate or highway. It's that tall tower with 3 sides. But I put the rest of them here just to say, just in case you don't see that tower, doesn't mean that there's not a tower or antennas providing coverage to your phone. They can put antennas on all kinds of different things. My favorite, of course, is this cactus photo here. The one on the left is a cell phone tower, and the one on the right is an actual cactus. Again, we won't see that here in Atlanta. This is from Phoenix, Arizona, but they can make antennas look like lots of different things.
And when I pick up my cell phone to make a phone call, can you describe the process of how the call is processed and connected?
I can, yeah. So when a phone is on, it's always scanning the environment, looking for the strongest, clearest signal. So that way, when you're ready to place a call, text message, or check your ESPN scores or something, right? It knows the tower and sector that has the strongest, clearest signal. And it will use that for your call, text, or data session. And so when I leave the court here and call my wife and say, hey, I'm headed back to Alabama, my phone will use the strongest, clearest signal. And that tower number and sector will be populated in the records and show that that's the tower used by my phone at that time. When that call is ended, it's terminated. that call is terminated, it's finalized in the reports, and then my phone again is waiting for the next activity for me, the user, to do. And again, it's scanning, always scanning, looking for the strongest, clearest signal.
Is the tallest, clearest signal always going to be from the closest tower?
It is not. Normally it is, but there are exceptions to every rule. So it's not necessarily the closest, but in most cases it is.
Okay. And when you make a call, what records does the cellular company keep?
Yeah, so again, they'll keep the call detail records, or CDRs, for whatever activity it was, be it a call, a text, or a data session.
Okay, and does it keep the record of which cell tower is being utilized at that time?
It does. It'll have all the data on there. Again, it'll have my number, the other number in contact with me, the date, time, the duration of that call, and then the tower and sector that used that activity, that activity used whatever tower and sector for that period.
Okay, let's go on to page 4. Can you describe to the jury what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so about 95% of all towers in the United States are what we call 3-sector towers. So a cell phone tower is put in an area to provide capacity, right? We see more towers in places where more people live and work because there's more people there, more users. And so in order to get more users out of a single tower, they've divided it up into 3 equal segments or sectors. And they do that. They take 360 degrees, a full circle, and divide that by 3, and you get each sector being approximately 120 degrees. So what we see here is on the left-hand side, if you are above the cell phone tower looking straight down on it, you'll see here, sector 1 in this instance would point toward 0 degrees or magnetic north or true north, right? Sector 2 points at about 120 degrees, and sector 3, 240 degrees. Not all towers will share that same orientation, right? If there's an apartment complex or a highway or, the Braves Stadium that they need to cover, they may turn that tower so that sector 1 would point toward 45 degrees, for instance, right? And then that would move sector 2 to, like 165 degrees. But that information is in the tower list, so it enables me to see the orientation of each tower and sector that's used.
Okay. Looking at I think we're on page 5. Can you describe to the jury what you've annotated here?
Yeah, so for the next couple slides, you're going to see maps. You'll see the phone activity visually illustrated on a map. And these are just how it's going to look. So if you look at the top part, this will show the tower and sector that's used. So as you can see, it's kind of a V with a shaded area. If you look at that, the 2 arms of the V where they meet together at the bottom, that's the cell phone tower that's used. And the shaded area of the V just shows what side of that sector is being used for that activity. It doesn't mean that phone's in the shaded area or the shaded area is the coverage area for that tower. It's just merely stating, hey, we're looking at the north side, this open side here of that tower. On the bottom part, what you'll see is what we call a call-out box. And so for each tower used, there will be a call-out box that describes the activity on each of those towers. So if we look at that, on the bottom it says CID, that's cell ID, that's the tower number. So that 732330 is that specific tower or the unique fingerprint of the network. That only exists one time within the AT&T network. And then that -9, that says the sector or side that was used. Also in the call-out box, you'll see the date on there, the time in local time, and then whether that activity was an incoming or outgoing call or text message. The number here, 145, again, that's the middle of the sector used. So in this case, it used sector 2, and sector 2 was pointed in 145 degrees. So that kind of south and east side. And you'll see it makes a little bit more sense when we look at the maps here in a minute. And then the last number on there is the other phone number associated with that activity, be it a call or a text message.
Can you describe what this is on page 6?
Yeah, so again, my report includes GPS location as it came from an attendee ankle monitor. And so what you'll see are these red dots with kind of the open area at the top. At the base of the dot is that GPS location that was provided by the device itself. So you'll see those in my reports in addition to the cell phone information.
All right. Can you describe what is on this map?
Yeah, so all of these polka dots are AT&T cell phone towers that were used by AT&T or operated by AT&T at the date and time of this incident. Also on this map are locations of interest. So we have the crime scene. It's a red box, as you can see, with the white letters CS in it. There's also a quick trip, again, the green box with the white letters QT in there.
Okay. And I'm sorry, what is the crime scene location here, the address?
Yeah, so it's 1590 Planters Row in Sandy Springs, Georgia.
Okay, now what are we looking at on page 8?
Yeah, so each of the maps that we'll go through here in a minute will all be organized the same. So on the left-hand side, you'll see 2 phone numbers, and they're broken down. Like the red phone number, the one ending in 404, 358-8254 will be annotated in red. So all of its activities will be highlighted in red letters with the red arms for the towers. And then you have the blue number, that's that 770-378-2989. And then at the top of each slide will be the date and time period that's mapped on this particular page. So again, this one is for February 1st of 2019 between 9:33 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see any areas of interest. So in this case, you'll see the crime scene is annotated there because we have the crime scene on this map here. And also remember that the blue dots you see around here are other AT&T towers.
And in your opinion, were both of these phone numbers consistent with being located at or near the crime scene between 9:33 a.m. and 2:30 on February 1st, 2019?
They were.
All right. Can you describe the map on the next page of your report?
So this looks kind of busy. That's because there's a lot of activity and a lot of travel of this device. And so again, just to orientate you, the phone numbers in the top left, the date at the top right, the date and time. So this is a continuation on February 1st, 2019 between 2:31 and 3:15 p.m. And the crime scene and the quick trip are both annotated on this map. So this shows the phone activity during that time period.
All right. And does it appear that the phones moved in the same direction as the attendee ankle monitor based on your review of the records?
They did. You can see on the bottom kind of the orange squares that have a number. So if you look in the bottom right, there's 1 and then it says GPS. That's the data from the attendee ankle monitor. And then the time underneath that is the local time of that activity with that specific latitude and longitude. And so you can see here it starts at number 1, 2:31 p.m. And you can see that there's a location down near the crime scene. And then we can kind of track them as they move north and west. And then if you look at the top left side of the screen here, you'll see a number 43 that says 43 GPS. That means that there were 43 by the ankle monitor, and you can see them all throughout here. And then that last one is at 3:15 p.m. And again, the towers and sectors used by both of these devices track in line with the movement of the ankle monitor during this time period.
And just so we're clear, do you know who these two phone numbers belonged to?
I do.
And who was that?
The red phone belongs to Mr. Merritt, and the blue phone was to his mother, I believe, Miss Merritt.
And what are we looking at on the next page, page 10 of your report?
So again, this is just a continuation of the phone and the two phones and the ankle monitor's movements. You can see this is between 3:15 p.m. and 3:40 p.m. still on February 1st of 2019. And again, if you look to the right, you'll see number 1 GPS. That's the first locate during this time period of the ankle monitor. And then you'll see that those movements move, to the west and north for locate number 27 at 3:40. And you can see the towers and sectors used from the two phones track in line with the movement of the ankle monitor during this time period.
All right, and what is on page 11 of your report?
So this is, again, a continuation up until the last locates and last phone calls, but this is between 3:40 and 5 p.m., also still on February 1st of 2019. And you can see on the bottom right-hand corner, again, we have number 1 GPS, and it's pointing to a locate at 3:40 p.m. And then you'll see the ankle monitor locates again move north and then move south a little bit. And the last locate is number 57, and that's at 5 p.m. And again, during this time period, you see the two phones, its activity track in line with the movements of the ankle monitor.
Okay, and after this, were you able to determine whether those two phones were used? You see the blue annotation for Shirley Merritt's phone. It says that there was an incoming call at 4 o'clock. After that, what happened to the records and device? Yeah,
this device wasn't seen again on the network.
Okay. And what about the red phone, or the defendant's phone, the 404-358-8254? It looks like the last annotation you have here is at 3:57 p.m. Were there any further uses of that phone after that?
Yeah, there's actually one north of that at 4:09 p.m. There's a data session. So his phone had some kind of billable data that created a record. And you can see that at 4:09 p.m. And then again, that's the last activity for that device on the network.
Queen.
Morning, Mr. Burns.
Hey, good morning, sir.
How have you been this last week?
I saw you Monday, so doing well, thanks.
Let's see. And just want to ask you a few questions. When did you get involved in this case?
I don't have the specific date. Again, I do a lot of these, so I don't particularly remember the time period that the original request came from the office here.
Was it within the last year or so?
Yes, sir, it was.
Okay. So you weren't involved back in 2019?
I was not, no, sir.
Back in 2019, you weren't asked to track these phones at the time which basically they were being sought after?
No, sir, I was not involved in this case at that time.
Okay. And likewise, you weren't involved with a Attenti or any type of monitoring service in tracking this monitoring device back in 2019?
No, sir.
Okay. Sounds like from what you told us, you received data and records from the district attorney's office as to both the cell phone records and the Attenti records.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And you've used your expertise and experience in order to, I guess, track those devices through the various networks and map them for us.
That's correct.
Now, With the AT&T, you told us, because that's primarily what you do is cell phone records, right?
Yes, sir.
But obviously, given your degree of expertise, you can do ankle monitors.
That's correct.
But let's talk about the cell phone for a minute. With the cell phone records, you basically get the call detail log and you use your various forms of expertise, computer programs, in order to map those records.
That's correct.
And oftentimes you're asked to do it for a certain period of time, on a certain day, certain hours, correct?
That's correct.
And that's what you did in this case. Now, AT&T, as you said, why is it significant for AT&T to get it right? Do they get it right because of the police?
They do not.
Why they're worried about it?
No, again, these are business records. And so these records are kept as course of business through whatever provider. So in this case, AT&T. So the thing you have to remember is that AT&T uses these records to optimize their network, right? It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we pay a lot of money for our phones and for our service to AT&T or Verizon or whoever we have. And if we're not happy, we go to the next provider, right? So AT&T wants to keep accurate records like these so that they can optimize their records, so that they know where are people placing calls from? Do I need another tower there? Where are their dropped calls at? So that maybe I can go check to see what's wrong there. So again, these are business records used by AT&T.
Because AT&T, they're more concerned about the millions of customers being satisfied and paying billions of dollars every year.
That's correct.
Than, I guess, thousands of police, law enforcement agencies around the country asking for information to help do criminal investigations.
I mean, that is correct, but at the same time, they're mandated by the FCC or Federal Communication Commission that they provide and maintain records for assistance with law enforcement. So again, we have, great relationships with all of these providers, and they're, with proper legal compliance, like a search warrant, then obviously they're willing to help us solve crimes.
Now with AT&T, you told us about the way in which basically you have a tower and you have a device, and there's an interaction between the tower and the device.
Yes, sir.
And oftentimes, basically, the tower is divided into certain segments in order to make it help facilitate more interactions with devices.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. And now, most commonly, we see these 3 sectors, correct?
That's the most common, correct.
We used to see like 4 and like 6 before, didn't we?
We have seen 6 previous. They kind of got away from the 6 model. There was a little bit of that. But yeah, the 3-sectored tower is the most common, although there are what we call omnidirectional. So there'll be like one small antenna, like the cactus example. That one cactus provides omni or 360-degree coverage in a certain area, like a park or things like that. So there are different kinds of antennas, but the majority of which that we use on a daily basis are these 3-sided ones.
Okay. And as we talked, I believe you mentioned this pot. I grab my cell phone and I turn it on. Does that cause an interaction with the tower just by turning it on?
It does.
Okay. And so is that noted in the cellular records?
So in the call detail records, that is not annotated. There are other records that are kept for shorter periods of time. These records are called timing advance records, and they're kept for days, not a year like Verizon, CDRs, and AT&T keeps call detail records for like 5 years. But there are other records that have some additional information on them. But again, those are kept for days.
Because obviously if AT&T is like to notate every time I turn on my phone, we're talking about possibly hundreds, thousands of times in which there would be an interaction per day.
That's correct. It would be very voluminous, a very large number, and they'd have to have storage units and databases for days.
And probably as a matter of economics, it's just not feasible for them to do.
That's correct.
Versus instead having this call data, call data basically recognizes when I talk to somebody, which is what's important anyway, because they want to know what type of my usage is.
Yeah, so those are, again, billing records. If you remember when cell phones became popular in the late 80s and early 90s, right, we paid for our plans in kind of two different ways. The first was we'd buy minutes, right? We'd buy 300 minutes. And so they had to accurately keep track of the number of minutes that we used. And if we went to 301, they made sure that we paid extra, right? But we also bought our plans in our home network, meaning if we lived in Atlanta and we traveled to Florida, to Disney World, for instance, to go on vacation, we were what's called roaming or outside of our home network, and they charged us extra. So they had to accurately keep track of the cell phone towers used so they could precisely bill us. So that's, again, what was started when the cell phones became popular, and that has continued to this day.
Now, going back to the call detail records, we talked about sectors and towers. Now, how big are these sectors? Is there like a certain defined area range, or does that vary?
Oh, it varies. Again, if we're talking towers and sectors downtown Atlanta, you could talk about, a half mile or less, the range of a tower, because there's just so many of them, right? But if you're talking a rural area like near Macon, Georgia, or, somewhere in some farmland in Wyoming, your towers are going to be farther apart, and you could have 5-mile coverage range. It all depends on the capacity that they need, is how close they put those towers together. And then they down tilt and change the coverage area based on the towers in the area.
Now, you told us that even though you may have, I guess for lack of a better term, I call it a ping within a certain sector, how precise is that ping?
So if you're talking about like the tower and sector used, so again, it depends on the towers in an adjacent area. So if I have a tower and a sector used in downtown Atlanta, I can look at all the other towers in that area and I can go, well, it's not on the east side of Atlanta if they use a tower in the west because there's 30 towers in the middle, right? And he would have used one of those if he was on that side. So again, depends on the tower coverage area and how close towers are together to how big that area is. But again, I'm talking a general area. I can't say that the device is at Wendy's at this point in time. I can say that it's in a tower and sector that might cover the Wendy's, the Home Depot, the whatever in a certain area.
Okay. So we're talking a matter of feet, miles.
Yeah, so I can't say where a device is using call detail records. I can't say where a device is within a matter of feet, for sure. Typically in a matter of miles if you were to look at the whole coverage area. But again, I'm not here to pinpoint that device. I'm merely here to say that device was in a certain area. And in this case in particular, it moved to a different area. So it used a different tower and sector.
Now, let's jump over for a sec. Let's talk about Atenti with this monitoring system. Now, does Atenti own towers like AT&T?
They do not.
Okay, so how does it work with them? Because obviously we're still talking about global positioning. So is it going to a tower? Is it going to the sky? How are those being, I guess, recorded?
Yeah, so the way ankle monitors work in general is that the device itself will get a GPS location based on satellites, hopefully sometimes off of towers, but most of the time off of satellites, it'll get the GPS location. And then that location is sent via the cell phone network to Atenti, right? So it's kind of like a cell phone attached to a person's ankle in this case, where that device is getting GPS locations most of the time from satellites, but then it's transmitting that information through the cellular network. So it's using the cellular network just to send the information, not necessarily to generate the location of where that device is.
Okay. So I want to make sure I got you right here. So the location is generated by the device.
That's correct.
And the cellular network sends it to somebody else.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So it's more like a highway which is used in order to get information from point A to point B?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then with the device being on a person, what type of range and precision do we have with that location?
Well, again, most of the locates are generated via GPS, and we use GPS probably every day. I know I use GPS to get here this morning, and it gave me turn-by-turn directions on how to get here. So in most cases, those are very accurate as we use every day.
Because I'm looking back at your map, which we have here before us. Generally, when we look at the cell phone locations, we have the two devices which appear to be moving pretty much in tandem. And they're on the same network, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, they're both AT&T.
So the assumption is that those two devices would somewhat consistently use the same towers and the same sectors, more than likely.
Yeah, if it's at the exact same time, correct. And again, it depends on how quickly the devices are moving. So, and if they're initiated, the calls are initiated at the same time, it should use the same towers and sectors.
Okay. Now you said calls, but you also just mentioned to us that one of the last times in which Mr. Merritt's phone is activated, it's not a call.
That's correct. Yeah, I should have said activities. I said a call, but it's an activity on the phone. So again, it could be a text message, it could be a data session.
But it's not just somebody turning the phone on and off.
It is not.
Okay. So we got the two devices which appear to be based on the sectors, moving somewhat in tandem, moving from, I guess, down inside, just outside 285, around 285, and up 75.
Yes, sir.
Now, you have a whole lot more points, though, apparently with that Attenti device. Because you noted, I think, over 50-some points in which you've recognized. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's way more locates from an ankle monitor versus, again, activities generated on the device.
Now, with the ankle monitor, is that based upon basically the device like always putting out a signal, or is it a timing issue? How does that work?
Yeah, so in our training from ankle monitor companies in the past, it really depends on what's going on the device. So obviously, if the person's sleeping and the device is stationary, there's not going to be that many locates that are sent. But as the device is moving, it's trying to get an accurate location of that device. It's sending more of those more frequently when a device is moving than when a device is stationary.
So that makes sense then if someone is actually moving, particularly in a vehicle, then basically every however many minutes that vehicle may be moving hundreds of feet.
Yeah, again, it depends. Some of the ankle monitor companies will set it to like every minute if it's moving. It depends on the proprietary information of the ankle monitor itself, but a lot of times we'll see it every minute, sometimes again more frequently than that, depends on movement.
Okay. And let me go back to the cell phones for a minute. Mapping the cell phones and their movement. Generally looks like, as I said, it looks like around 285 and up 75 going north, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, I noticed with a Attenti device, pretty much the way you mapped it, your dots are pretty much right on the expressway. Now, is that a coincidence or a map like that?
So again, the GPS is going to be pretty accurate. A lot of times, again, we use it to get to places every day, right? And so it'll tell you where Starbucks is or McDonald's or whatever else and be pretty accurate. So again, a lot of times it's based on that. Also, the GPS is, a lot of times if it's if it knows that a road is 6 feet from the actual lat long that the device generated, and there's several that are a little bit off the road, it will autocorrect to the road itself. So it'll snap, what's called snap something, I can't remember the exact term, but it basically snaps it to the road because it knows that you're probably not driving in the grass 60 miles an hour. You're probably on the road going 60 or 70 miles an hour.
And with the Tanti device, you did the mapping, I'm presuming, through the lat long, the latitude and longitude.
Yes, sir, I did.
And those numbers we got is like 30-something point dot, 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 dot. So how far out and how does that translate to an exact position?
Yeah, so again, those are latitudes and longitudes based on the latitude and longitude system in the world, right? And so it'll say like 33 degrees, so many minutes, so many seconds, and that allows us to get a specific spot on the Earth based on that latitude and longitude.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You're listening to the trial of Richard Merritt from the Hidden Killers podcast on the True Crime Today network. Press subscribe now and get ad-free episodes by upgrading to our premium experience through Apple Podcasts. More next.